Welcome. Today's lesson is about the history of our home here on planet Earth. This lesson is going to bridge the gap between your last 2 years of science, which were physics and chemistry, and connect it to this year, which is biology. The early universe formed 13.8 billion years ago with an event known as the Big Bang. You've probably heard of the Big Bang theory. The Earth, however, is relatively young and it formed only 4.6 billion years ago. Check out this image. This is the periodic table of elements that was available at the dawn of the universe. As you can see, it's pretty empty, and the only two elements available on it are hydrogen and helium. The heavier elements did not yet exist in the early universe. So how did they get there? Well, stars were made mostly of hydrogen and helium, but as they died, other elements were released and scattered throughout the universe. By the time the Earth formed, all of those naturally occurring elements that you learned about last year in chemistry and that were part of the periodic table, those were all available. Important elements including things like carbon, which is very important for life, and oxygen, those were available at the time that the early Earth formed. All the atoms that are inside of you actually were once inside of a star, so we can consider ourselves as all made of stardust. Here's the periodic table of elements that was available at 4.6 billion years ago when the Earth formed. Early Earth was a hostile place and it wasn't really good for life yet. It was very violent, filled with volcanoes, toxic chemicals in the atmosphere, but it changed eventually. The most prevalent chemical compounds that were in the atmosphere were water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia, and the Earth's surface was very hot. As the Earth cooled, the water vapor condensed and it created the Earth's oceans. 3/4 of the Earth's surface is actually submerged in water, and this abundance of water is one of the main reasons why life is possible on our planet. So what about life on Earth? When did life first appear and what did it look like? Chemicals found on early Earth and arriving from meteorites reacted to form molecules. Those molecules combined to form compounds like amino acids. And organic compounds came together in the right combinations to form the very first basic cells. What were those cells like? They were pretty much like bacteria. Those were the very first life forms that were on our planet. When did this happen? Life emerged on Earth approximately 3.5 billion years ago. Now, there's this concept that scientists understand that all living things share some very specific things with each other that make them living things. This led to an idea, and it's called the last universal common ancestor, or LUCA for short. And LUCA is the organism from which all life on Earth descended, and that connects the entire tree of life. So this is LUCA, and we are all descended from these very, very first life forms that existed on our planet. Here we are eukaryotes, but all other life forms like bacteria and archaea also descended from LUCA, the last universal common ancestor that was around at the time life first appeared on our planet. So all life from the smallest amoeba, right, to the largest redwood tree share certain features. Now, these features are what we call the characteristics of life. For an organism to be considered a living thing, it must meet these 8 requirements: cellular organization, heredity, response to the environment, regulation, homeostasis, energy processing, growth and development, reproduction, and evolution. I will take you through each one of these one at a time. So the first one, all living things have cellular organization. In other words, all living things are made up of cells. Cells are the smallest unit that can actually be considered a life form. If you go smaller than a cell, you're just looking at parts of a living thing and not an entire living thing. Cells are the smallest building block of life. The second requirement for an organism to be considered alive is DNA, or hereditary information. Organisms pass on traits to offspring, and DNA is the universal genetic code. Third is response to the environment. All living things are able to respond to their environment in some way. We respond when we touch the hot stove by pulling our hand away. Plants respond to the sunlight by turning towards the sun. All living things are able to respond and interact with their environments. Number 4 is regulation or homeostasis. Living organisms must be able to regulate their internal conditions. This is called maintaining homeostasis. For example, you must keep your body at a constant temperature, which is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Our bodies have to stay at that temperature because our systems function at that temperature. Our bodies cannot get too hot or too cold. Humans have to maintain certain conditions inside their bodies, even when things change in their environment. Some of these things include temperature that we've discussed, 98.6 or 37 degrees Celsius. We have to maintain a constant blood pH of about 7.4, blood pressure of 100 milligrams of mercury. We need to maintain our blood sugar levels, and we need to maintain the water content that's inside of our body. And our body does this for us automatically, keeps us at a constant internal state known as homeostasis. The fifth requirement that all living things must share is energy processing. All living things require energy to carry out the functions of life. They must be able to obtain energy and process it to be used in their biological functions. Another way of saying this is that all organisms have a metabolism. Animals process food or chemical energy and convert it into matter and work, mechanical energy. Some bacteria and all plants convert light energy into chemical energy. This is energy processing. The sixth one is growth and development. All living things grow and they develop, they change over time. You probably don't look exactly the way you did when you were a newborn. And same thing with a seed and a grown tree. You can see the difference in growth and development. All living organisms grow and develop. Seventh is reproduction. Living things must be able to pass on their traits to future generations of organisms. There are sexually reproducing organisms like humans, but there are also asexually reproducing organisms like bacteria. 8 is evolution. Populations of organisms evolve. So it's not individuals that evolve, but groups of organisms evolve. So species change over time. If we look at the fossil record, we can see how ancient species changed over time to form modern day species. And that is the 8th characteristic of life. Thank you so much for listening.